Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Making Sense of the Social Collaboration Landscape. My name is Tony Byrne. I'm the founder of Real Story Group, and I'm really excited to be here today with you. It's a fascinating topic. This is a wide-ranging landscape, and hopefully we can help you make sense of it. But let's first try to put this in context, and you may have seen our vendor map before. You can download this from our website at realstorygroup.com/vendor map, and here's where we put these sort of digital marketing and digital workplace technology vendors in a kind of a single infographic to help you understand sort of what vendors do what. And so today we're talking about the red line, which is social collaboration. And what's interesting about this is that it's actually quite a similar profile to the other technology segments, which is that you have this kind of suburban periphery of a lot of pure play vendors and some minor suites, and then you have this sort of downtown central core with a lot of big name infrastructure vendors as well who are in this space. And so this gives you a lot of choices about suites versus best of breed, infrastructure vendors like Microsoft, IBM, and Oracle versus more pure play cloud and SaaS vendors and so forth. And so this is not too dissimilar, say, than if you were looking at digital asset management, web content management, document management. It's a fairly vibrant marketplace. As you can imagine, a lot of innovation is actually happening not in the center but at the edge, which is a kind of a common theme that's going to come up here. I'll just flag it now, and then we'll come back to it several times during this half hour, that for most organizations, social collaboration is going to be a multi-vendor exercise for them. And so this is really important to understand that there's no single tool here that's likely going to solve for all of your use cases, and to that extent, you need to be cognizant of how you may put different tools together to get the complete value for your colleagues. And the other bit of context setting here is putting enterprise social collaboration in the broader context of what we call a digital workplace toolkit. So, there's obviously a number of different tools that you may need to master to provide a complete digital workplace experience. Certainly document management, enterprise portals, part of the mix, certainly enterprise search, mobile increasingly important. But the one that we think is really central here is enterprise social collaboration. That in a modern digital workplace, if it's going to be a more human-centered or person-centered, if your employees are your customer and to that extent more customer-centered, then you really have to be effective in allowing humans to work the way we've always wanted to work, which is socially and collaboratively. So let's look at, first of all, what your peers are saying, and I'll just share a little bit of data from some survey research that we did late last year, and you can go back through our archive and find some papers and webinars that sort of get into this in more detail. But the thing I want to talk about today was customer satisfaction with products. And so we asked people on a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfied are you with the social collaboration tools in your workplace? And so there were 380 respondents, and so we have fairly high confidence in this. The average score turned out to be 5.6, or really just about the middle, so the average between 1 and 10 being 5.5. So it's basically middling or average satisfaction. It turns out that some other technology segments we cover, the satisfaction scores are even a little bit lower. So the story here isn't all bad. But when we look more deeply at the data, it turns out that the respondents really cluster into 3 groups. You have some in the middle who are just sort of average satisfied. Okay, we're getting mostly what we wanted, but we have some problems. There's another group to the right that are very satisfied, that they really hit the sweet spot and got what they wanted out of that tool. And then there's another kind of grouping to the left where they're deeply dissatisfied. What we see often in those cases are people who kind of took a run at this, fell and skinned their knees, and in many cases a lot of failed pilots or successful pilots with failed rollouts. So, obviously you want to be in that grouping sort of on the right, that people are very satisfied. And what's interesting about that group is when we then talk to them in more detail, what we find about them is that first they put a lot of care into some of the non-technical issues around this, making sure they had effective community management, change management, a lot of education and not just system training. But also they were very careful about the tools that they selected and that they found the right tools for the right fit, that they had tested those tools, and so they weren't asking the technology to do things that that technology didn't want to do. So clearly tool fit is a key. It may not be sufficient for your success, but I think it's one of the necessary preconditions of being more satisfied than just 5.6. So let's look at this then from the context of social collaboration. I want to do some level setting here because a lot of times people talk about these things differently, and they are somewhat different. So social networking is usually working with people not necessarily in the context of a specific goal, whereas collaboration tends to be more formal and usually has a particular goal, and sometimes they're project-oriented and projects that have sort of a beginning and an end, whereas social networking tends to be more evergreen and something you do persistently. But the reality is that your colleagues, they don't necessarily look at these as two different things. And at the end of the day, no one's saying, "Hey, now I'm collaborating, now I'm networking." They really want to be able to do both of these, sometimes both of these in the same context. And the challenge here for you, and I think this is one of the key defining features of this marketplace, is that vendors have tended to focus on one or the other. In other words, you have solutions like in the Microsoft world for collaboration. Historically, SharePoint was good at that. SharePoint not very good at networking. That's why Microsoft bought Yammer. As you know, Yammer's not particularly well integrated with SharePoint, and so you have to sometimes go into two different worlds to do this, when in fact the value really comes in being able to do both collaboration and networking and social layers sort of within the same work context. Same story with IBM, where historically you had Quicker for collaboration, then a completely different platform, Connections, for social networking. And even among all the other tools that we'll look at, you tend to find that they come out of either social networking and offer a little collaboration, or they come out of the collaboration space and offer a little bit of social networking. So once again, we're in a situation where if you really want to deliver your colleagues what they want, you often have to sort of cobble together different tools. And the marketplace as a whole, I think, still has there's some work to be done here in terms of providing better APIs and integration among these different systems. So when you look at the actual services themselves, we often find that people tend to break these down in terms of features, like blog features, file sharing, microblogging, presence and instant messaging, profile services, that sort of thing. And this is a useful way to look at how these tools differ, and certainly this is some of the rating criteria that we have. What you see here is that this is for SharePoint. That SharePoint at some level is so-called feature complete. So it has at least some capabilities across the entire spectrum here. In fact, I think it's the only product we evaluate that has at least 1/4 of a Harvey ball. To be sure, several of these things it doesn't do very well. For presence and IM, we would assume that you would have a link on top of SharePoint. But this is why many organizations often default to SharePoint, either from IT or sometimes either from business, because they say, well, look, SharePoint is feature complete, so it should be able to solve all of our challenges. But what you really want to do when you're looking at this technology is to focus on business applications. So this is what we call the sort of arc of participation, which is these are the different sort of canonical business applications that drive business value. And our argument is that this is what your colleagues are actually looking for. They're not necessarily looking for, hey, we need a blog, we need a wiki, although they may communicate it that way. What they're really trying to do is create knowledge bases, do project-oriented collaboration. Projects are typically repeatable types of work activity that are often have a beginning and an end. You may want to collaborate externally. Whereas community is a little bit further down to the right on this arc, begins to introduce more social networking, more unstructured. Communities tend not to have a beginning and an end, and are really more about knowledge sharing. innovation support and ideation, and social Q&A, two very critical applications. You see a lot of success stories around that, something you should really be looking into. One of the challenges there is that for both of those tools, we tend to find that best-of-breed providers are much better than the platform players. And then going down, we talk about socializing legacy processes, certainly expertise location, and finally enterprise conversation and enterprise networking. So these are specific applications that, and this is, we argue, this is really the lens you should be looking at. So not at some high level, gee, we just want a more open enterprise, and not at a low level it says, hey, we need blogging wikis, but somewhere in the middle that says, we're going to combine these sorts of features, we're going to leverage our social power in the form of, and our collaboration efforts, in the form of specific sorts of applications that will drive business value. So thanks again to our partners at CMSWire. You can find them at cmswire.com. This is my contact information. I encourage you to come to our website and maybe download some samples.